So with The Legend of Zelda, there's been a lot of games that have been canceled or have changed dramatically during production and development, and we have a list of 5 potential Zelda games that could have been. So starting off our list is Wind Waker 2. Now, Nintendo in interviews has mentioned that with Wind Waker, they were working on a sequel. There's even some concept art that we can see of what Toon Link would have looked like as an adult. We eventually got the Wind Waker sequel, Phantom Hourglass, on the DS, so I imagine all of the unused stuff, they just took it and put it on the DS instead of finishing it on the GameCube. And they turned what would have been Wind Waker 2 into Twilight Princess. So, yeah, what are your thoughts on this, Nate? Apparently, it goes, or as Nintendo says, that fan feedback of Wind Waker, no one liked the cartoon art style, so they try to make it realistic.
So it's actually funny. The current president of Nintendo of America was the one who told the current president of Nintendo, Tatsumi Kimishima, was at the time the president of Nintendo of America, and told it literally called him up when he found out they were making Wind Waker 2 and said, nobody in the West likes this. You need to shift back to like a realistic Ocarina of Time thing. And then bam, instantly they switched to Twilight Princess.
Yeah.
And somehow, the amazing thing is they somehow did that and announced Twilight Princess less than 6 months after. Like,
with the most very successful announcement. Like if you watch the videos of when they show the trailer, just like the standing ovation they get is like magic.
Oh, yeah. It's one of the best E3 reveals ever.
Mm-hmm.
Like if Nintendo really wants to catch people off guard, it's revealing a new Zelda game at this E3 this year because no one expects it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. Wind Waker 2 is a very interesting situation.
Yeah. Because
it doesn't feel like they ever got far in development on it. Yes, we know Phantom Hourglass ended up being the sequel. I don't think Phantom Hourglass really used much of the ideas from the OG Wind Waker 2. It was kind of made after the fact because now they had to change it and make it for DS and blah, blah, blah. And they focused a lot on the tap controls, which... Anyways,
yeah,
I'm not a fan of Glass.
I thought Spirit Tracks was one of your favorite Zelda games.
I love Spirit Tracks, but not Phantom Hourglass.
Oh.
The only thing I liked in Phantom Hourglass is that one puzzle where you have to close it because no one could figure that out.
Oh yeah,
it was a very clever thing that just it wasn't clicking. Wait, what do you mean I shut my system and put it away? Everyone just figures it out by accident. But yeah, Wind Waker 2 is just. I would have liked to see it happen just because they clearly had a plan, or at least AJ Newman did. Like, we had a clear-cut plan for what Wind Waker 2 was going to be, and we never really got that, even though we ended up getting a trilogy for it. It probably wasn't what the OG vision was.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Spirit Tracks only existed because Phantom Hourglass was the best-selling handheld game ever. So they're like, oh man, we got to do something now with this and get a sequel out, just like they did with Majora's Mask. So I was actually surprised there wasn't a quick turnaround sequel for Twilight Princess after how well that sold. What's really weird too is when they shifted from Wind Waker 2 to Twilight Princess and how fast they announced it. It's kind of like they had to have like started on this Twilight Princess almost before Wind Waker was done. Like this had to be a concept they had before, and then they just said, "Yeah, we're going to do Wind Waker." Because how could they have that much footage ready to go 6 months later?
Yeah, it could have been something where they were experimenting with different ideas, and then Wind Waker 2 looked like it had the most potential, so they started going with that, and then whenever they found out that Americans, I guess, are racist against cartoons...
The reaction to Wind Waker... I almost wonder if like they were starting on Wind Waker 2 before Wind Waker originally came out, and maybe that's when it was said. Like after that, the second E3 showing or whatever of it, and I wonder if that's when Tatsumi picked up the phone and like, you can't do this. Yeah. You see how people react in the U.S. This is not good. Everyone is mad because the last time they saw Zelda was Space World 2000. This is not good.
Yeah.
But when they show that trailer, like you just talk about that quick turnaround or something, they have all this footage. A lot of that stuff is either really, really beta or wasn't even in the game.
Wasn't even in the game.
Part of me wonders how much of it was those like leftovers Wind Waker 2 stuff that they had still. because like so much of that stuff, like probably like 80% of that trailer is not in the game. What is in the game? Bokoblins, or no, they're the Bulbins riding the boars, and Link using horseback combat and the Bridge of Elden.
Yeah.
Picking up cats.
Yeah,
and picking up cats.
The boss fight.
The best part.
The boss fight with whatever version of Goma that was.
Yeah, totally different. In fact, we got that in Spirit Tracks instead.
Well, people did freak out at the point where he took out his sword and he was hitting people when he was riding the horse, because we've never been able to do that.
Yeah.
I remember that being a big moment. But
Primo stuff. That made it into the game.
Because I remember like the most hyped I got was when they were building up, like there was this huge epic open field battle about to go down, and you're just like, what is happening? Are we about to get like the imprisoning more? This is crazy. And then no, we got Hyrule Warriors instead. Many years later. But yeah, I wish we would have saw what the original vision. It's kind of like Wind Waker in general had a lot of content cut from it that they never re-released, because they claimed they used all those ideas in Twilight Princess or other games. But I'm like, really? I don't remember there being a GameCube island in any other game.
Oh yeah.
Well, there was DS Island.
There was a DS Island. There was a DS Island.
So that's probably what they like. Just probably changed it to that.
They were inspired, obviously, by
All right. So number 2 on our list, Zelda 3, the original Zelda 3 concept that Daniel and I we went in depth on in one of the top 5 canceled Zelda games videos that we had, which it's an interview with Miyamoto and I forgot the other guy's name. The person,
that other guy.
He was in
with the glass. He has glasses.
Yeah. He was the developer on.
He's Japanese.
What works at Nintendo?
Yeah. No, I don't think it was Nintendo. It was.
No, it wasn't.
It was.
Okay.
God, do you remember what game it was, Daniel?
No, I don't.
It wasn't.
I'm terrible.
It wasn't.
Yeah, this is the one game on the list. I missed that video you made.
All right. So, anyways, it was like, I want to say it was something akin to Secret of Mana.
Yeah,
don't do this.
3-party.
Don't do that to me, GameOverJesse.
So
no, they had a party where you had like a healer and a fighter. Yeah,
you're breaking my heart right now.
Yeah. So
a Secret of Mana Zelda is my dream.
But we did get A Link to the Past instead, and
so
A Link to the Past is like, I love it.
Yeah.
I shake when I talk about it because I love it so much.
So basically, the idea is Miyamoto was in an interview with a magazine, and there was another, I guess you could say, famous developer that was also being interviewed about their game, and they were going back and forth talking about the games they were working on. Nintendo, this was about, I would say, maybe a year before the game released, and Miyamoto was saying stuff like he was describing a completely different game than what A Link to the Past was. He was saying there is a 3-party system in the game, like an elf, a fairy type, and something else. And then he was saying that he wanted it to be more RPG focused, but sort of in the style of the original Zelda. So like moving away from the 2D Zelda 2 style back to traditional 2D Zelda styles.
Sure. Yep.
And he said that the game was complete, ready to go. They just didn't want to release it yet because there was another big game about to launch, and he didn't feel like if he released the game, they would end up like hurting each other. So he was going to wait
because they have to compete with each other instead.
Yeah. So Miyamoto, yes. So Miyamoto was, he basically waited and 6 months, 8 months, a year, however long it was, to release the game from when it was done. But during that time that they waited, they changed what it was going to be into a completely different game. Like maybe the dungeon designs and story elements stayed similar, but instead of being like a 3-player game where it's like a fairy or whatever, an elf, which we kind of still got in Ocarina of Time. Like there was the fairy that was your companion, and then Link is the elf character, and then there was the third character, and you're supposed to be able to switch between all 3 of them. Each of them have their own unique abilities and stuff. It was completely like very, very different from what you would imagine a Zelda game would be. But that was basically the concept for it, was that it was going to be a 3-player game. And yeah, like aside from Triforce Heroes, we haven't really seen a 3-player Zelda game. So what are your thoughts on that? You said that your favorite game would be like a Secret of Mana crossover style Zelda game. You saying that
if they could somehow mash Breath of the Wild with Secret of Mana, I would die and go to heaven right now. I don't know how they would do that.
Then you would miss the game.
There's so much. I know. There's so much like different elements between those games that I don't even know how you would mix it. But this is why I'm not a game designer. I don't have to worry about that. I could just be a fanboy and dream, because those are my 2 favorite games of all time. And Secret of Mana was my favorite game of all time up until Breath of the Wild. So I always felt like Secret of Mana to me was the Zelda game I never got. So to even have a rumor out there that makes it sound like A Link to the Past could have been Secret of Mana, just like get out of here with that. Get out of here with that. Like now I'm glad that Star Fox 2 came out on the classic instead of this unreleased version of Zelda, because oh man, I'm not saying it would have been better than Secret of Mana. It probably wasn't, since up at that point they only had the 2 Zelda games and both of them were really limited in their own ways. So whatever they were doing might have also been limited at the time. But yeah, man,
like it's easy to kind of romanticize what could have been though, but like they did change it for a reason.
Well, yeah, and what we got
today
is one of the best Zelda games that ever come out. So,
and are like often regarded as one of just the best games that have ever come out.
It's like every time any place makes the top 100 games of all time, it's always on there.
Yeah, like I feel like if we hadn't got A Link to the Past as it was, also like that game sets a lot of standards for the franchise. So. Like, who knows it? Like, if we hadn't gotten A Link to the Past, what Ocarina of Time would have been? And
Ocarina of Time was just a 3D A Link to the Past.
Pretty much. There's a reason I love them both so much. So, like, clearly there was a game that worked for me, and then they did it again, and it worked for me again, so.
Right?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
All right, so I was trying to find. I was
say you're doing something over there. I don't know what you're doing.
I was trying to find that interview to see who the other director was, but it was like there were 2 game developers, Miyamoto and the other guy, and then they were both being interviewed at the same time. I think it was from Square.
Yeah. Can you imagine being interviewed and you sit down for the interview and then Miyamoto sits beside you to talk about the next Zelda game and you're like, nothing I say.
Well, won't that depend if it was like the head guy of Final Fantasy or something? He'd have just as much clout back then.
Okay, true. But if it was a guy just talking about whatever RPG that came out at that time, like
I'm just a random developer.
I'd be sweating. I'm like, oh god, here's Miyamoto, and he's here to talk about Zelda. Nothing I say is good. Like all the headlines are gonna be whatever he says, not what about what I say.
Yeah.
And that's back in Miyamoto's heyday. Like everyone thinks he's a legend now. Back then, like they viewed him as the savior, specific in the development community.
Because at that point, he Donkey Kong on the arcade, and then Mario Bros, Mario 3, Metroid. You got he didn't really do much with Metroid. I think he's often credited for it.
He was part of. Yeah, he didn't really.
But he's got Zelda and Mario to his name, so.
Yeah.
I mean,
what more did you need? I mean,
pretty big.
Did you need anything else?
Yeah.
Back then, no,
exactly.
Man. Oh, in the last 5 years, I just founded 2 of the biggest franchises that ever existed. Have a good day.
All right, so
maybe the only other person would maybe the creator of Tetris. They would have had
comes and sits down.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So I wasn't able to find the website.
It doesn't exist. You're making it up.
No, we used the website. You can see it in the video that we made.
Okay. Gotta go watch the video now.
You're gonna have to link me to the video after.
So
now I'm very curious.
When you land on the Jesse's channel, it's like one of the featured videos on the front, I think.
So our third Zelda game, and I'll occasionally be looking this up for the people that are watching to try to find it while we talk about some of the other Zelda games. But the third Zelda game that we could have gotten was a canceled third game for the Oracle of Seasons, Oracle of Ages games called, it was originally going to be 3 games, Mystical Seeds of Courage, Power, Wisdom, and I think it was Courage was the one that was ended up being canceled, and then they put elements of it into the other 2 Zelda games that they did release. And funnily enough, it started as another project that ended up being, I guess, canceled as well, because Capcom began working on a remake of the original Zelda for the Game Boy or Game Boy Colors. And while they were like halfway done with it, Nintendo said something along the lines of, hey, why don't you make something new and original in the Zelda series instead of just a remake? So they ended up changing what they had to one of the Oracle games, which is, I was seeing comparisons of, like, if you compare some of the bosses, some of the layouts of the overworld, it looks very similar to the original Zelda game. So they didn't just get rid of everything that they were trying to remake. They incorporated it into one of the Oracle games that we do have. But in the same way that the 2 Oracle games link together to give you a special ending, you were supposed to be able to link all 3 of these together, but Nintendo and Capcom thought it was too much to do on the system itself, because it was the original Game Boy, Game Boy Color, very limited in what it can do. So basically, I would say they were a little bit ahead of their time with this, and I guess the concept of creating 3 different Zelda games, trying to make them all feel unique and not like, oh, this feels exactly like this other game. So
well, Pokemon gets away with it, so
yeah. It's like, but this game has different Pokemon though. It's like, yeah, but that's like the only thing that changes is like.
Well, I mean, that's something. Oracle and Seasons and Ages at least had some very different stuff between the 2 games.
Yeah,
surprisingly so.
So one of them was supposed to be focused on combat, and the other was supposed to be focused on dungeon design and puzzles and stuff, which is what makes them feel different from each other. And I guess the third was supposed to be a mix of both. So elements from it got incorporated into the other 2 games, and they changed the titles to Oracle of Seasons, Oracle of Ages, instead of the Mystical Seeds of whatever. So
the Mystical Seeds of Tirnanog.
Yeah, so what are you, Daniel, what are your thoughts on this? Is this something that you would you have preferred the 3 separate games, or are you satisfied with just the 2 that we got?
Well, as it's been mentioned, the Oracle games are like the 2 Zelda games that I haven't played. So, but I feel like, you know, more games are better. Is that bad of me to say? Like, if we got 3 games instead of 2, like, yeah, that'd be great. But like, I don't know how they could have done it, because like, you have to get 2 passwords, basically, and then put them in, or.
Yeah, it would have been a password system.
Like it's, yeah, so they would have to do. Who knows what they would have had to do instead? Like, give you half the password at the end of one game, and then half of it on the other game, and then when you get the third game. But like, part of the thing about the Oracle games is you could do them in either order, right? It doesn't matter which one you play first, and then
you just have to get to the end.
So really quick, to go back to Zelda 3, here's a quick quote from Miyamoto. He says, "Ever since I started making the first game in the Zelda series, I've been saying that the third Zelda will feature a party, one that consists of the protagonist, who's a mix between elf and a fighter, a magic user, and a girl. The fairy that appeared in Adventure of Link was actually a party member designed for Zelda 3.
Oh, so it's Secret of Mana.
A girl who looked, and then he goes on, a girl who looked a little like a fairy and whose role consisted of reconnaissance. Yeah. Okay. Like the characters in action games that don't engage enemies in combat, but rather go and scout out the surroundings and return to you safely. It's also fun when action-adventure games let you choose who to send out. That's the sort of thing I'm thinking I'd like to do in Zelda 3. I've never been too particular about the story, and this isn't obvious. I've never been too particular about the story in games I've made in conjunction with Earthbound creator Shigesata Itoi. So that was who it was. Earthbound, not Secret of Mana. Sorry. That's who was being interviewed beside him. He says, the stories of Mario and Zelda titles have always been supplemental to the actual gameplay. Action games only have stories attached to make the experience more interesting. Itoi, I believe that's how you pronounce his name, Itoi, so I apologize if I'm not pronouncing it right, is the one that writes the story, and I just help out a bit. We were more or less finished already. Now we just have to wait until release. But the factories won't make any copies for us. They have to make a ton of copies for Dragon Quest. I'd like to wait until it comes out before releasing the game. Once Dragon Quest fever sets in, this year is done for. Curiously, staggering the releases affects the demand for the Super Nintendo. The game's,
Okay.
Yeah, so basically, while he was waiting on Dragon Quest to release for the system, they ended up changing it into a one-character game, and basically completely different. Instead of sending out any one of your 3 party members to like scout out while the other 2
Yeah, it
fight.
sounds a little tactical.
Yeah, so very, very different. But it is it is interesting that he was saying that the concept was something that he was thinking of ever since the very first Zelda.
It's also interesting when he says, like, yeah, but we can't get a manufacturer to make it because they're making Dragon Quest. What?
It's like you own the factories.
Yeah, like
it's your carts.
Isn't it your carts? And you could just be like, yeah, make this game instead right now. We own this property.
Yeah, screw Dragon Quest.
We don't own Dragon Quest. Why are we waiting on Dragon Quest? Oh,
it could have just been an excuse. Like, just
but
who knows?
I think that the delay was good, though, because what we got with Link to the Past was amazing.
Still one of those, how different would the Zelda series be today if instead of Link to the Past, we got this co-op, 3-player thing?
Yeah, there's another thing that it doesn't mention it in this, but there was a separate interview where he was talking about whether or not the game was in Zelda 3, whether or not it was being developed for the Famicom or this upcoming Super Famicom. So a lot of the stuff could have began to play on the NES, but then they changed it to work on the more powerful console. So yeah, there's a lot of different things there. But going back to, I guess we can go to the 4th game since we already discussed Mystical Seed of Courage. So I'm sure a lot of people have been familiar with this. This is probably the newest game that has come out of, I guess,
screenshots.
Yeah. So
yeah.
Just a month or 2 ago, a employee from Ubisoft who I believe worked on the Mario Rabbids crossover released some artwork that he had to show for a Game Boy Advanced remake of The Wind Waker. And it looked pretty darn cool. So Daniel and I, we talked about this at length in one of our videos. So Nate, what are your thoughts on this? I'm sure you've seen the screenshots.
Yeah,
or the screenshot.
and we saw it because people were asking him, how did they start talking to Nintendo to come up with this Mario plus Rabbids idea? And one of the says, well, actually, we originally pitched this thing to Nintendo with Wind Waker way back when, and they loved it, but they said no.
This is a great idea.
Whatever. Well, it's fine. Maybe they thought it was going to be too competitive with other games at the time. But it's obviously something that never had a ton of work put into it. Who knows if they even had like a working game? If it wasn't, maybe it was just some art assets they threw together to come up with a concept to be like, look, we think we can do this on GBA. Let us do it. Or whatever, and they didn't. But I think, I don't know. Just thinking about that, that would have predated it coming out. Well, yeah, that would have because DS didn't come to 2005, I want to say.
Yeah, I mean this came out before, or they were working on this before Minish Cap came out.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of why they
I got a lot of
canceled it.
Minish Cap vibes when I looked at it too. I was like, oh yeah, 'cause
Yeah.
Wind Waker and Minish Cap kind of have that similar artistic style.
Yeah.
I don't know. It just looked like really cool. Like I'm all for trying to do something zany like that, where you're taking this 3D Zelda game and making it like this 2D experience on this platform. I think that's just a really neat thing. I don't know how many fans would have bought into it, but it can work with Zelda, because Zelda's also a 2D top-down franchise.
Yeah, the interesting for me is that the Game Boy Advance, I believe, is the only console that Nintendo didn't create their own original Zelda game for, because Capcom made the Game Boy Advance Zelda game, Minish Cap. So do you think the reason that they turned down Ubisoft was because they already had a deal set in with Capcom that's like, hey, you're the only second or third party company that's allowed to work with us on Zelda, and it was like already a deal or in the contract with Capcom that they couldn't get someone else to do it?
I don't know if there was like an exclusivity contract there with Capcom, because I think, especially when you're talking about Zelda, it's kind of one of those franchises where anyone who, like, if Nintendo offers Platinum to work on it, I doubt that they're going to be like, okay, we'll make it for the only company that can make Zelda games.
Yeah.
Like, that's too big of a franchise for them to even make that demand of Nintendo. So I think it was more so, I mean, you got to think of the timing, you know. You had DS coming out in 2005. You had Wind Waker release, in 2003. They just announced Twilight Princess in 2004. So somewhere in that time frame is when this idea was pitched to them. And it's kind of like, well, we're hyping up this new Zelda game, and we have a brand new platform coming out in 2 years. So a GBA version doesn't really make sense right now in that small window they have. Now, you could argue, well, maybe it would make sense on DS, but then at that point, you could arguably port Wind Waker to DS in some form.
Yeah. So, moving on to the fifth and final Zelda game, Zelda Gaiden, the beta, or basically Zelda Gaiden was to Majora's Mask what Ura was to Ocarina of Time, which really doesn't make too much sense to me, because they canceled the Ura expansion because the 64 disc drive wasn't selling well. So their answer to that was to start production of a new Zelda game that took advantage of it. So we're talking about Zelda Gaiden now, Nate.
Yep.
Yeah, so basically, it's essentially what I would call, I just said that to the other people watching, but to get you up to speed, I look at it as essentially what Ura was to Ocarina of Time was almost what Gaiden could have been, or Gaiden could have been to Majora's Mask. And the crazy thing is, they went into development of it with the 64 disc drive in mind. But the Ura expansion for Ocarina of Time was canceled because it didn't sell well. So it's like, if the last one didn't sell well and it had to be canceled because the hardware that was meant to use it didn't sell well, why would you start a new project to take advantage of that hardware? Like, maybe they were hoping that sales would end up going on so that they could release it, but it was essentially what Majora's Mask was, except it was going to have a full 7-day cycle, 1 week, as opposed to just 3 days. Obviously, the disk drive failed, and within the development time, they pulled it back from the disk drive to work solely on the hardware that we had, but because of that, there were certain aspects of it that wouldn't run on the base hardware, so that is why it also incorporates the expansion pack, so you could have more RAM to play. So that's basically what it was. I don't really know if there was meant to be more dungeons involved with it. I just know that I guess the side quests and some of the other stuff would have been a bit more complicated, as opposed to tying into a 3-day schedule. Now there's a 7-day schedule. So there's also a few glitches that you can do in the game to see what the moon would have looked like on like day 1. Or because day 1, day 2, and day 3 that we get in Majora's Mask is essentially day 5, day 6, and day 7 of what Gaiden would have been. So when you started out on day 1, the moon would have been like so far away that you wouldn't even be able to see that it had a face until you're 3 or 4 days in and you look up and you're like, oh, the moon's getting bigger and it has a face. What the heck is going on? So that's... I think it would have been interesting, obviously.
I don't think Zelda. It even... probably at this point... I don't think it had a face at this point, though, because if you look at early Majora's Mask screens, it didn't have a face in earlier development. So who knows, like, when they added that terrifying detail. But yeah, I think at that point in development, it probably didn't have a face. But even still, the moon getting closer and closer is already kind of a terrifying prospect. So
yeah, I wonder if it would have been something that, like, because when you start out, I think it's the Happy Mask salesman tells you that you have 3 days to get the mask back for him. So it would have been interesting if instead of him telling you that, he just says, hey, get this mask back for me, and then you're stuck in that 7 days without knowing the moon's getting closer and closer until you realize on the last day, it's like, hey, the moon's taking up the entire sky. What's going on here?
Yeah.
So, like, it would have been interesting if it was left for the player to figure out for themselves, or once you return to the Happy Mask salesman, then he tells you. So,
yeah, the moon thing would have been more dramatic if it was over 7 days too, because it basically starts out where it looks like it's almost hitting the ground anyways.
Yeah, gravity would have been like, sucking you up.
Like, the only way it got more dramatic is because of the cutscene at the end. Otherwise, it's kind of like, yeah, okay. I mean, the moon looks a little bit bigger than it did 12 hours ago, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things is also that the moon is, like, it's so big, it's visible from anywhere in the game. So, I mean, if they had a slower build to that, you know, like, that just, yeah, it would really add to that build up. I mean, as it is, you already have to kind of discover, like, when you first walk out into Clocktown for the very first time, the first thing that happens isn't that they look up at the moon and they're like, whoa, it's getting bigger.
No, the dog
that
attacks
part you
you.
Save.
That's the first thing.
That's
the first
that
thing
dang
that happens.
dog.
And everyone's racist to DQ scrubs. But you know, like, it's not till you get to the observatory and then that you, unless you just look up for some reason, but until that point, then it's like, whoa, that moon is really close. Which is kind of a moment I think we take for granted at this point. You know, we kind of forget that, like, oh yeah, what was the first time you discovered that? Unless you watched that whole beginning cutscene before starting your save file, you wouldn't really know.
The real life advertising before the game came out.
Or there's that. Yeah. I mean, I knew what the first time I played because of word of mouth.
Yeah.
Because I didn't get it, like, at release, but yeah, I would have liked to have seen sort of a more dramatic build to that because, yeah, it is, like, already really close.
Yeah, and Majora's Mask. Sorry, I was going to say Majora's Mask is already thought of. The reason a lot of people like Majora's Mask isn't really the dungeons because there's only like 4 of them. It's because the huge focus on the side quests and the character interactions, and all of that is boiled down to 3 days. So potentially,
believability of the world.
Yeah, so potentially we could have had over twice as many storylines, side stories, and character interactions.
Yeah, I can see a lot more happening outside of Clocktown too.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, I always say that Majora's Mask and Twilight Princess are really like the opposites of each other, in that Majora's Mask, what's brilliant about it is its world building and its NPCs and its world. It's a very rich, living world. And Twilight Princess has a much larger world, but it's not as rich. And really, what's brilliant about Twilight Princess is its dungeons and its really great level design.
Yeah.
But
well,
in that way,
in Twilight Princess, the moment you walk into the clock town and you realize most of these people are fake and you can't even interact. It's kind of like, how did we go from clock town to this?
Yeah, exactly.
How?
Like, no one worth talking to in Castle Town.
Hi. Like, okay, hi. Nothing? No quest? No, what? What's the point of talking to you again?
All right.
Everyone in Kakariko is dead, and no one in Castle Town is worth talking to, and except for Telma.
2D backgrounds.
Yeah, exactly. And then Ordon Village, once you're done there, you never go back to it for any good reason except for grabbing some heart pieces. So
Yeah.
I would just love to see this original vision for Majora's Mask of the 7 Days.
Mhm.
I mean, this is one of those things you hear about, and it's just like with the Zelda 3 thing, like it kind of sucks that we're never really going to see what that original vision was.
Yeah, I bet Miyamoto sits down at least once a year to play through some of these canceled Zelda games.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, but I mean, like,
he's too busy playing Pikmin 4. That's been done.
Give me Pikmin.
He has, like, I have no doubt in my mind that he has the fabled legendary Ura expansion on a working 64 disk drive just tucked away in his closet. That's like, this is...
He probably thinks no one cares.
He probably doesn't even have it on that. You got to remember, he's at the forefront. He just gets to play it straight on his PC.
Oh, yeah.
No problem.
That's true. But, you know, like, this is not to say we don't love Majora's Mask, folks. It's one of my favorite games. I did an awesome video on Nate's channel about it. You should go watch it.
Majora's Mask is an amazing game.
Yeah.
It's so good. But,
all right, so to end this, which of these 5 games, I'll recap them here in a second, which of these 5 games would you have liked the most? At number 1, we had Wind Waker 2, not Phantom Hourglass, for the people watching. That's a different concept. Yep. We have Zelda 3, which isn't A Link to the Past, completely different. We have Mystical Seed of Courage, I believe, was the one that was canceled. Mystical Seed of Power and Wisdom got turned into Ages of Seasons, or Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Seasons. Then we have the Ubisoft Wind Waker Game Boy Advance remake. And then at number 5, as we just covered, Zelda Gaiden, which was Majora's Mask, but more. So, yeah, I would go... For me, it would be a tie between Wind Waker 2 and Zelda Gaiden, because playing through a follow-up story to Wind Waker as an adult Link, like maybe Hyrule gets unflooded or something happens, who knows what the concept was. So yeah, like I would have loved to see that. There's probably a lot of the dungeon concepts in Wind Waker 2 that they reused for Twilight Princess. They just retextured it to make it look realistic as opposed to cartoony, so you probably could have seen a lot of the same puzzle designs and challenges from those. So yeah, mine would be Wind Waker 2 or Zelda Gaiden. What about you, Nate? Which of these 5 would you have rather played?
Survey says 2, Secret of Mana.
Oh.
Zelda edition.
All right. And you, Daniel?
I'm going to go with Wind Waker 2, just because I really love Wind Waker. And like I was giving Holly a hard time when we had her on for when she was saying that she didn't like Wind Waker when it first came out. Yeah. I was like, no, it's so good. It's and yeah, I'd like to see kind of like, we know what happened with him now, you know, with that Link. You know, they went off, they did Phantom Hourglass, which may or may not be a dream, and then they, you know, founded New Hyrule for Spirit, laid the groundwork to Spirit Tracks. But, you know, like, that Link is a really different Link than we've ever seen otherwise. That incarnation of Link in particular, and he's a character that has he has a more robust personality than any other Link that has come before or even after, I think. Like, God bless Breath of the Wild, but that Link is just not as expressive, and he doesn't have as full a character, in my opinion. Partly due to his amnesia, partly
yeah, I thought that was weird. Like, they said that one of the things that they liked most, or one of the things Nintendo liked most about Wind Waker, was that Link had so many expressions. Like, he could his eyes could pop open really big, he could change his mouth into weird shapes to show different emotions. The same for Skyward Sword. Like, in one of the dungeons, when you're walking down to it, the heat from it, you can see it like blowing Link's hat back, and he tries to cover his face from the heat and everything. Yeah. So there's a lot of stuff there in the cartoony or artsy styled Zelda games that was missing from Breath of the Wild. In Breath of the Wild, it seemed like they just wanted him to be as emotionless as possible.
Yeah, he's kind of like a plank of wood that you just paint your face on. But yeah, I really like that character, that version of Link. And I feel like I would like to see more with him. And it would be cool to see more of Submerged Hyrule, because like we get to see a little bit. We get to see Hyrule Castle, and then the path to Ganon's tower, and then that's it. But you see like so much more that there is like landscape, and it makes you wonder. Like that was one of the things I was the most curious about when I played Wind Waker before.
Yeah.
Was like, what else is out there? You know, I want to see all this ruined Hyrule, you know? And yeah, it would have been really cool to maybe to explore that some more. Who knows what? But yeah, Wind Waker 2 would have been really cool, I think. Like I do really enjoy Twilight Princess for what it is. Like some of the best dungeon designs, some of the coolest items in a Zelda game, even if some of them are heavily underused. But yeah, it would have been cool to see. The other games, I think, kind of all, other than the third Oracle game, the other ones kind of became other things anyways. So yeah.
All right. So if you guys have about 10 more minutes, we can quickly try to get through the questions.
Yes, let's.
All right.